Hello, and welcome to Cannabis Marketing Live, all puff, no fluff. I am your host, Kendra Losi, and I'm really excited about today's guest. We are continue to bring in the best, the brightest, some of the most innovative people in the industry, and I'm really excited to introduce Sarah Sanger today. And Sarah is a CFO for Oak Investment Funds. And she's here and she's going to join us and talk about the opportunities available in the cannabis space. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Like I said, we're really excited. When I first met Sarah, I think we were supposed to talk for about 10 minutes and we talked for about 20 or 30 just about what she's doing and what she has going on and her background and how she got in the space. So I wanted to bring her on to share that information with you. Sarah, can you tell everyone your story and how you got started in cannabis?
Sure. Hi everyone. So my story started off pretty boring. I have a very traditional background, a teaching degree and an MBA, and I was kind of plugging away through the corporate world in quantitative and finance positions, clocking in 9 to 5 every day. And then in 2016, around the time when the election in California was happening, and that perfectly coincided with my corporate burnout. I decided that it was time for a change in my career and my life. And I had some motivations to pursue the cannabis industry. The first was that I felt that in the hands of the wrong people, the transition could have been handled very irresponsibly, and we could have been left with a regulated society and a regulated system that didn't have the right protections as far as consumer safety and so forth. And I wanted to make sure that my kids were growing up in a world where the access was safe and that things were being handled properly and that I could play a role in that responsible transition. I also have family members that unfortunately depend on the medicine for, serious medical conditions. And then personally, just throughout my life, cannabis has been a good option for me. Whereas alcohol has not been a good option for me. So I had some motivations, kind of non-financial motivations for getting into the space. And then as an economist, I just knew that there must be financial opportunity and economic opportunity in the space, particularly from the capital markets side, where there's all this demand for capital with the favorable momentum in all the states and all the legalization and development opportunities for the operators. And the supply of capital was next to non-existent because there's no traditional capital sources, no private equity, no venture capital, no bank loans. And so I knew that when there's an inefficient, it means that there's opportunity. And then from my skill set, whereas my resume would look like every other resume in any other recruiter's office for a traditional industry position, in 2016 in the cannabis industry, seeing someone that had, a long corporate career, an econ degree, an MBA, it wasn't that typical. And so I knew that the human capital would be lacking and that there'd be opportunities for me. So I just decided to go for it. I didn't know really at the time what it would look like, but I knew that the next stage of my career was going to be in the cannabis industry.
I love that. And I think that's where our conversation started because I did the exact same thing with my MBA and my corporate career in 2016 and took it and ran with it as well, only from the marketing side instead of the financial side. So, given all of the challenges that there are in the cannabis industry, as you came in with your finance background, how did you start off by working with companies and where did you find your niche in the industry before we get started about talking about some of the aspects of the cannabis industry that makes it unique and creates all those opportunities for us?
Sure. So the past few years have evolved a lot in where my focus is. When I first came into the industry, I didn't really have any contacts or any industry experience. So I decided to get some certifications that I thought might help me. So I got my securities license and registered myself with a broker dealer, and that enabled me to legally help operators with fundraising. So I could make introductions of investors to operators and, legally be compensated for that referral, if you will. So that was a lot of time and effort to get that license and to find a broker dealer that was comfortable with the space that I'd be operating in. Mm-hmm. I also got my real estate license because I understood that a lot of the challenge of being a cannabis operator in California was finding real estate, and so that there might be an opportunity for me to get involved on that side. And then what I did is started going to industry events and finding companies that were far enough along that I thought they had a viable chance of success, but not far enough along that they had, top heavy executive team. So people that really needed a CFO or even just a utility infielder, if you will, that could answer some of the business questions and help them avoid bad deals, build their financial model, help them manage investor materials, financial reporting, some bookkeeping. And I kind of was just able to take on clients for whatever they needed because I was flexible and I had, I was just getting started. So I had a wide range of clients that I was working with on an hourly basis or a project basis. And that gave me a great framework for figuring out what I wanted to do more full time. And it helped me meet a lot of interesting people that I still know and work with today, just in a different capacity.
Absolutely. While you were talking, Amy, hi Amy, stopped by to say that she loved hearing your story and how you got started and how brilliant we both are. So one of the things that you mentioned is just the opportunities that and trying to find your place and where the biggest need is, but where the opportunities are in the industry as it's changing and starting to really grow in new and interesting directions. What is your experience in that area, and what is advice you have that you would give to somebody looking to get started or to continue just to find their place?
Yeah, so my advice would be, if you go into this with a very set 24-month plan of what you're going to do and how you're going to get there and what it's going to look like, more so than any other industry, even any other evolving or nascent industry, you're going to be wrong. There's too many twists and turns and opportunities and sinkholes and landmines along the way. We like to say that the cannabis industry is like dog years. If you've been in the cannabis industry for a year, it's really more like 7, because you've had that many battle wounds and that many learning opportunities and that many humbling moments. So you really need to understand that you're going to go into it with a skill set and an idea, and that you're going to have to be able to adapt a lot and dramatically in order to stay in a good position to capitalize on the opportunity. So I found myself at these events really trying to meet people and have an open mind. And the role that I have now that is full-time plus is with Oak Investment Funds, which was a result of someone that I met at an event where I had no real interest in finding a real estate partner, where I was just there for my own education and learning. And I think I was speaking on a panel, but you have to be open-minded and understand that from the regulatory environment to the competitive landscape to the consumer sentiment, there's going to be so many changes and there's going to be so many twists and turns. And you just need to stay open-minded and light on your toes. And in this industry, you have to worry about things like banking, and you have to worry about things like what your family is going to think about your career choice and what your friends that live in other states are going to think and how to talk to your kids. There's just a lot more considerations that you need to keep in mind. So having an open mind and having a flexible perspective, I think, is really important. Sort of difficult for people like me that are very type A and very, black and white. But I think the most important thing would be to stick to your traditional or whatever legacy, past information and fundamental knowledge and foundation that you have, but stay open-minded to what's going to come along the way, because there's no telling.
I think one of the things that I see people do, and when they're when they're coming into the industry, is they, say they did X for their entire career, but now all of a sudden they come into an industry, but they need to learn the industry, but now they want to do Y. Right? And so they're trying to learn a whole new industry. They're trying to learn a whole new career path, which is great. But as a way in, it might not be the most effective way to join a new industry, especially one that's changing minute by minute, practically. Some days it feels like. When we look at the market and how people find their place in it, in the industry, what are the types of challenges that you see for businesses that go beyond the normal startup? You mentioned banking. What other challenges have you seen businesses fall into that might be outside of the normal, like banking and taxes side of things?
Yeah, I think part of it is the transition, this is not a new industry. This is an industry that was once treated, as a black market, illegal, hidden in the shadows, and is now becoming not only legal, but extremely highly regulated. Mm-hmm. So that were at the top of their trade 5-10 years ago in a gray or black market situation, that were told to not write anything down, tell no one what they do, this never happened, to again, not just becoming legal and okay, but to becoming extremely highly regulated. So you're taking these people that only survived and thrived by virtue of their willingness to sort of obfuscate things, or flirt with the lines, and toe the line, into this market that's highly regulated, where the tax burden is very high, the compliance burden is very high, the expectations of the regulators and the public and the supply chain are very high, and it's just a difficult transition. So you're taking people that understand the product and the industry and the plant and so forth very well, and you're trying to marry them up with people that understand traditional business disciplines very well. And it's a little bit like oil and water sometimes. I come from other highly regulated industries where I understand that there is no gray area. It's black and white, and you follow these rules, and there's no exceptions. But there's a little more nuance in this industry. And even as you can see at the regulatory level, the regulations come out, and then the line moves a little bit, and then the line moves, the ball's constantly moving. So it isn't all black and white. There's a lot of judgment needed, and we have to trust ourselves and other operators to exercise good human business judgment. Not everyone's in a position to even understand how to make some of those judgment calls.
Absolutely. And everyone's trying to do the best they can based on what they know and the information they have and the regulations at that time. One of the other things that we talked about is that there is a ton of opportunity in the cannabis space, and it's caused by an imbalance of supply and demand of capital, which creates economic opportunities. Can you speak to that and how that's relevant to business owners in the space?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for the operators, it isn't an economic situation that's necessarily in their favor. But I will say that versus 2016, it's getting better. There is more capital coming in. There's more, larger funds and larger capital sources that are available, and more investors that are maybe open-minded. But if you think about just the first thing you learn in economics class, it is the higher the demand, the higher the price. So the more people that want the Lululemon workout pants, the higher the price is going to be. On the flip side, the lower the demand, the lower the supply, the higher the price is going to be. So if all the 90% of the world's avocados spoil in a harvest, then the supply is going to be low, and again, that's going to drive the price up. And it was a combination of those two things for the cannabis industry in 2016 and even still today that causes what I'll call, quote, prices to be high. So little to get their businesses going or to transition to the regulated market, but the traditional capital sources, the big private equity funds, small business loans, et cetera, were not available. So the combination of a very high demand and a very low supply means that prices are high. So what that means in practical terms here is that if somebody were growing corn and wanted to raise money from investors, they would be able to perhaps value their company at $10 million, and bring in money accordingly. A cannabis operator with the exact same financial and economic prospects would have to raise money valuing their company at, say, $2 or $3 million. And what that meant was the investors were getting, 3 to 5 times more of the company for every dollar that they invested. So again, that's not necessarily favorable for the operators, but it does mean that there's some sort of opportunity, because as long as the market is inefficient like that, there's going to be some arbitrage. So that was part of the story that I used when I was trying to, talk to my contacts about why it was the right time to get involved, is because there are no conglomerates competing. There are no traditional capital sources competing. If there's any moment in history for a small investor like me or a small startup operator to have a minute, it's right now, because the incongruent regulatory environment is prohibiting those big players from coming in.
And it's interesting as people try to, gamble on when that's going to be possible. when that's going to shift back.
But I mean, it is an opportunity because the small cannabis businesses that I work with would not have had this much runway if Marlboro and Coca-Cola and all these companies were investing 100 times, $100 for every dollar that my clients can have. So they're getting a chance to get ahead and position themselves to be, very valuable, attractive targets. The federal situation is not good for the industry on the surface. It does give risk-taking small players a chance, to make a splash in the industry that they wouldn't have had ordinarily.
Absolutely.
Or little to make money that they wouldn't have had ordinarily because, more institutional capital would have taken all of the deals.
Absolutely. And that's something I see in a lot of the discussions online about all of the major companies, whether it's alcohol, you mentioned Coca-Cola, Marlboro, all of those companies that are just ready, but they're waiting for the banking system to iron itself out, because then they're ready to go. And what does that mean for, how can the smaller companies survive? And you're right, they've had a long runway to really stand out and make a difference and actually create that brand and their brand story. But it does leave a lot of questions for who's prepared for when those companies come in. And how can companies prepare for when those bigger companies come in and that influx of competition. You mentioned risk taking. And I think that's really an interesting thing because the people in this industry, most of them, whether it was in the illicit market before, absolutely 100% risk takers. When I hear some of the stories of people that were in the industry before things were legalized, the stories are crazy as they were trying to, not Breaking Bad levels of crazy, but sometimes, as they were trying to just manage with what they were doing. And then when you start looking at how things have become, I still think that risk takers right now is still a character trait that's in a lot of the people in the industry. Would you agree with that? Or what have you seen?
Because I don't consider myself a huge risk taker. I think I am I take some risks, small risks, but I think it's just all relative. I mean, now I'm brained this me and I'm just doing what anybody else does, looking for great real estate deals and trying to put them together. There is still some degree of risk taking, but for example, I don't think people that are investing in cannabis companies as kind of an arm's length investor are facing great risk of any real consequence from the federal level. I guess my point is, I think the risk involved with the fact that we're doing something that is not federally legal is pretty low. I think the risk that we're doing something that is in an emerging industry where there's going to be a lot of losers maybe is risky, the same way it would be in any other startup industry. And then, like, from a career perspective, I think it was risky for me to give up my cush, high salary, benefits, 9-to-5 job. But I mean, there's pros and cons to both. I think that was a risk that I was ready to take at that point in my career. But I mean, I think in general,
you froze there.
People open risk in this. Oh.
Sorry.
Yes, I think in general, I would say.
Go ahead. Good. Sorry, you're back.
Yeah, I would say all else equal, these are slightly more open-minded, risk-loving people. And it depends on where you're involved. So I'm involved mostly on the real estate side, which I would say is not the same level of risk as me taking out a mortgage against my house to start an extracts company or to build out a cultivation or something like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you can manage.
And it's different levels of risk. I think what I was alluding to was more just moving into an industry that's changing so much, that's so fast paced and that's so new and considered federally illegal right now. There's just several layers of unknowns and navigating through those.
I think what makes it very risky is if you're not open-minded and if you don't have enough resources to where, for example, in San Francisco, people started applying for licenses in May of 2018, and they had to have their real estate already identified, and the city hasn't even gotten around to giving out more than a very small handful of licenses. So you've had to carry San Francisco real estate for now over a year and a half to even have a chance at a license. And that's just not, it's a losing proposition if you had, 3 months worth of rent in the bank when you went into that, because you can't even survive long enough to know if you made it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I've heard the similar stories about Los Angeles too, right? People that were trying to go through the LA application process got held up for a long time, as well as LA was trying to figure out its city challenges. One of the things that, as we talk about risk and as we talk about change, you mentioned that change is the only constant. In the last 3 years, since you started in the industry, what would you say are the biggest changes that you've seen that have created the most impact on what you're doing and what you're seeing?
I would say the most difficult and impactful is the regulators that change the rules. So they'll come out with a draft. Everyone will plan accordingly, get everything ready, buy real estate, buy machines, get lab testing, whatever it is. And then some external powers that be or influences will change the way the rules are written. And all of a sudden, you don't need to be 1,000 feet from a school. You only need to be 700. And this person's going to buy this property, and it's going to render your property, non-viable. So those things are very backbreaking, because in many cases, there's been significant investments made based on the understanding of the draft or the then current rules, and the rules changing can be very debilitating. So I would say that's been the chaos that's been the most disruptive. And I think luckily for all of us, that's kind of tempt the regulated market. And as the rest of the cities write their rules and the state gets everything under control, that should settle down. But for the past, ever since the regs were first written, or even the elections happened, the constant change at the city and state level has been really crippling.
Absolutely. And it's been interesting. I mean, just even I saw it firsthand with companies with packaging, right? The regulations changing in the packaging, plus, like you mentioned, the real estate and the locations. There was an interesting article that came out, I saw yesterday in the LA Times, about how more, like almost, I think it was 12% more people that were polled in the state of California approve the use of marijuana and legalization, which is higher than it was when it first passed, which I thought was really interesting. It's double digits higher than when it first passed, which is interesting because now a lot of counties, what the article was saying was that a lot of counties and a lot of people in cities where they don't have dispensaries are now pushing for that because the city or county made it illegal or didn't want it to open any in their city. And so now more people with that increase of approval are asking for that, or starting to demand easier access.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the chaos is really being driven from the regulatory level, and there's also just so many unintended consequences from how the regulations are being rolled out. For example, certain cities, LA is sort of the notorious one, were not enforcing, shutting down illegal dispensaries. So if there's no enforcement, and you could go to a regulated, state regulated dispensary and pay 30% more because of all the taxes and the regulatory overhead, or go to an illegal dispensary and have a wider selection of products and lower prices. I mean, how are we going to motivate the consumers to go to the legal shops? So that's an unintended consequence that was the black market and really hurting the legal market. There's cities that made very liberal zoning rules so that more businesses could locate in the city, but then made their taxes so high that no operator in their right mind would ever want to be located there. And if they were going to be located there, they were going to try and find some creative way to structure their business so that they could recognize the least amount of revenue there. So the fact that everything's being done both at the state level and then different from city to city is causing a lot of the chaos. And I think that all the regulations were written with the best of intentions, but in many cases something was left out or something was added in that really just put a wrench in a system and created some unintended consequences that really hurt the operators.
Absolutely. And when I was in Northern California in the Bay Area, one of the things that I saw there too was that, you have these dispensaries that are going through all the legal regulations to be completely legitimate and follow all the rules. And then you have delivery companies, right, who are coming in from outside, and they're they're sidestepping all the rules. So you have people actually going through the trouble, spending all the money to become legal and adhere to all the regulations, and then there's so many openings and areas for people that aren't.
Right. And also you're kind of getting rewarded for procrastinating or even sort of neglecting some of the rules, because the people that like rules will be written and they'll start complying the next day, get all their systems set up only to find out the rules have been changed. And the people that hadn't bothered to even read the rules yet were like, oh, cool, I'll just read the new rules. So I don't know that it's, but the way that the regulatory environment has unfolded has really hurt many of the companies that I work with.
Absolutely. So after all that negative change and impact of change, let's talk about some positive things that you've noticed in the last couple of years from your perspective, because one of the things that's really interesting about you is that you're able to see, you have clear visibility into a lot of the different aspects of the supply chain. So what positive things have you seen change in the last year or in the last couple of years that are positive impact that people can help navigate too?
Sure. So I would say there's a few. I think from a consumer perspective, the products are that are in the market now, while they may be a little bit more expensive and maybe a little bit less variety than you'll see at your illegal shop down the street, the quality of the products that are in the market, in my opinion, has really been elevated, from consistent dosing to transparent, very clear marketing and understanding of lab tests and ingredients, to variety for people that want lower doses versus higher doses, to some the ability to get some amount of medical perspective on what type of strain or product is going to be best for your ailment. The fact that this is legal now allows the universe to start doing some real disciplined research and study the actual medical efficacy. And then just on the adult use side, to make sure that dosing is consistent. No one's going to have like a 2.5 milligram mint and have some sort of overdose situation. That's just not going to happen, hopefully, with the way that, the market is today. So from a product perspective and an accessibility perspective, I would say we've come a very long way. I will say that because of how difficult the regulatory environment has been and the market dynamics have been, we're seeing the survival of very strong companies with very strong founders. I've seen clients that were told no 100 times and that it wasn't possible and that it wasn't legal and that they couldn't do it. And they've persevered and pushed through that and understood that when they were hearing no, so was their competition. And if they could push through it, they were going to be the ones to survive. And it's been very inspiring. I'm not like that. If someone tells me no, I take my ball and go home. But I've seen some very perseverant operators and bound down walls. And I've even seen some that were explicitly recognized by the regulators as having really forged new ground and blazed a trail for those behind them. So that's been pretty cool to see. And as the state regulations have had time to settle in and more of the cities are getting kind of stabilized, I think the environment is going to get a lot easier. And those that were able to survive 2018 will be in a position to coast, once everything is stabilized, because it will not be getting harder from here. It'll be getting easier. There'll be more competition, but at least the rules won't keep changing.
Absolutely. And as things become more settled, oh my gosh, there's so many things that are just moving forward, whether it's the Safe Banking Act going through the Senate, for CBD at least, it's just everything's moving in the right direction, which, get ready, because there's a lot. While the regulatory change might start simmering down a little bit, that means it's wide open for everybody else. Yeah, no, absolutely. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add about change or the opportunities created? Otherwise, we're going to go into the speed round, Sarah.
I would just say there's many opportunities at different levels. So, most people think about joining a new industry as you need to invent a product or think of something really unique and, set up shop in your garage and learn a completely new science and a new trade and get customers to buy it and so forth. There's ways to bring whatever you've been doing in any other industry into this industry, and it's needed in the cannabis industry more than in any other industry. So if you know how to if you know how to build websites, or if you know how to practice law, or if you know how to build financial models or do marketing or do sales, and you think, oh, no cannabis company would want to work with me because I've never done it for cannabis, it's quite the opposite.
It is.
People that haven't necessarily been educated by the cannabis industry, that have been educated by a traditional industry with all the traditional business disciplines and the rules and the best practices and the SOPs. So it's definitely not a detriment if you don't have cannabis experience, and you don't have to invent a new gummy to come into the industry. You can bring whatever your background is to the industry. Most any background is needed, whether you're a chef or a journalist or anything. So that's unique. And then as far as a risk management perspective, the same thing holds. So the deals that I'm working on right now are real estate deals. So we're buying real estate, we're financing it, we're raising the money, we're closing on the real estate, we're leasing it out. And so we have some exposure to the risk that we're doing something illegal and that this market isn't fully legal, consistently legal across the board. But we are at one arm's length from it. So if the operator gets shut down, I still own the real estate. I still own a building that has value. And so there's ways to protect yourself, not quite comfortable to start cultivating or manufacturing, to participate, in an ancillary business or a service provider or real estate where you're getting maybe most of the upside without all of the risks.
Absolutely. And there's even banks that'll let you, as an ancillary business, actually use have accounts. And there's things that are a little easier if you're not touching the plant that make it, easier to hop into the industry and get started. Versus, but you know what? If you have a great idea for a new gumby, by all means, join as well. That doesn't mean you can't do it, but just it's something to consider.
Right. Just there's something for everyone.
Exactly. Okay, Sarah, you ready for the speed round?
I am.
All right. I need to figure out how to bring in a little timer so that way there actually is a whole speed element to it. So until then, it's an imaginary timer. So I'm going to go ahead and set that clock. Okay. So the very first question in the speed round is, what are your favorite products in the space?
Yep. So I'm an edibles fan. So I like the Plus gummies because I feel like no matter what the situation, how much I've eaten, what state of mind I'm in, it's a very consistent experience, good taste. So my endorsement goes to Plus gummies.
I'm with you. I've actually been taking them every night to sleep lately. Not that you can say 1 = 1, but I've been using them to sleep. I don't know if you're a reader or podcast listener, but are there any books or podcasts or publications that you've been currently paying attention to?
Yep. So I like fiction. So I've been reading some novels, old and new, but nothing particularly noteworthy. But as far as podcasts, I am a big fan of The Daily and Up First and How I Built This. I find all of those to be very efficient ways to get inspired or information or caught up with what I need for the day.
I haven't tried Up First. I'll have to check that out. I love How I Built This.
Yes, How I Built This. Up First is a quick, 10 or 15 minutes. And I listen on 1.5 speed, so I get to listen to 50% more podcasts for every minute that I
just finished listening to a book that way.
And then you put it on normal speed and you don't understand how people can listen to something so slow. But
yeah, some stuff I do when I really want to pay attention, but if I'm trying to just get the gist of what they're saying, I got it. All right, let's keep going.
One day I'll do 2x, but for now I'm at 1.5x.
The book I just listened to, I moved up to 2x, but it's not something I can normally do. Usually I'm a solid 1.25, but they were just talking so slowly that I was like, I can't.
Good. And if it's good. Good time saver.
Exactly. Okay. And then I know you've been traveling a lot for work lately, but if you could plan a trip to anywhere, where would you like to travel to?
A lot of domestic travel in my life, but not much international travel. So I'd like to get myself across the ocean and spend some time in Asia, and then hopefully some time in Africa one day.
Ooh, yeah, Africa's on my list. I've spent some time in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Japan. Yeah, but that's about it for Asia.
I have small kids, so it might have to wait a few years, but we'll get there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's important too. Okay, Sarah, And the last thing, I've got you on the screen with your email below, but where can people find you if they want to connect?
Yeah, definitely feel free to email me. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch. I am also on LinkedIn, so you can search for me by name. I don't think there'll be too many, and would love to hear what you're up to.
Absolutely. And is there anything that you wanted to, any last messages you wanted to share before we close up?
Yeah. So for the past about year and a half, I've been pretty laser focused. So if anybody has any interest in learning more about that or the opportunities in that arena, I'd be happy to chat. And yeah, I mean, whatever, I'm open. I live in Southern California, and if you have an interesting idea or an opportunity, I'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. So you guys heard that. You can get a hold of Sarah on her email, which is on the screen one more time, and find her on LinkedIn as well. Thank you very much for your time, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And we'll be back next week with talking to Brian Buckley, who has a very interesting business that's supporting veterans with cannabis, and it's a nonprofit. So I'm really excited about what they're doing as well. So, all right, Sarah, thank you very much. And you guys have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.